My wife cheated on me with her boss, then staged a fake breakup that cost us over $250, $0 in legal fees and property disputes. I never imagined betrayal could ruin our lives like this. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, but here I am. Honestly, I've always believed in the idea that if you love someone and trust them, nothing could break that bond. But that illusion shattered faster than I could blink when I started noticing the little things. It all started about 6 months ago, right after we moved into this fancy new house, something I worked my ass off for, by the way. My wife, Lisa, seemed a little more distant, more irritable, and honestly, more bitchy than usual. She'd snap at me over nothing, and her phone became her constant companion. She'd hide it when I entered the room, and I'd catch her locking it or quickly flipping to another app when I got close. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just stressed with the new job, or maybe she was having some kind of midlife crisis. Lisa's always been a bit dramatic, so I figured she was just blowing off steam. But then I started noticing more things. Her phone bills shot up, more texts, more calls at odd hours. She'd leave her phone in the bathroom or in her purse when we were together, and when I'd ask about it, she'd give me some half-assed excuse about work or some friend. But I knew better. One day, I decided to check her phone when she wasn't around. I don't normally do that, but something just felt off. I unlocked her screen and started scrolling through her messages. That's when I saw it. A string of texts between her and her boss, Mark. They'd been talking for months, I could tell from the timestamps. But what really hit me like a punch in the gut was the way they talked about meeting up after hours, keeping it quiet, and not letting anyone find out. I saw pictures, screenshots from their meetings, both of them. Smiling close together, and one of her in a hotel room bed. The worst part, she was telling him she loved him. I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with had been sneaking around with her boss. Mark was a known player, a guy who'd been in and out of trouble, but Lisa always told me she was above that. She said she was loyal, faithful, committed. And here she was, cheating with her boss. I felt my stomach drop, my head spin. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. I wanted to scream, to shout, to break something. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew that would change everything. The next day, I set up a plan. I waited until she was at work, then I printed out the messages, saved the photos, and took screenshots of everything. I felt sick, but I knew I needed proof if I was going to get any answers. I also started digging into her bank accounts, her emails, and her social media, anything that could confirm her double life. That's when I learned she'd been taking money out of our joint account, sometimes large sums, to pay for her secret meetings. Over $10, $0 in just a few months. That's when I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown betrayal that threatened everything we'd built. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. Deeply hurt. I never thought Lisa, my wife, could be capable of this level of deceit. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I needed to cool down first. I needed a plan. I had to think about what I wanted, how I was going to handle this. I was angry, yes, but I also felt betrayed and humiliated. I never thought I'd be that guy who gets cheated on, especially not by someone I loved so much. And yet here I was, sitting on the edge of everything I knew, realizing my life was about to change forever. I had the proof now, and I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next step was to face her, but I didn't know what I'd say or how she'd react. All I knew was that my world was about to turn upside down, and I was just trying to stay grounded in the storm. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing over everything I'd uncovered. I kept replaying the images, the texts, her lies. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach repeatedly. My wife, Lisa, the woman I'd trusted more than anyone, was sleeping upstairs in our bed, probably completely unaware that I knew the truth. I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, trying to come up with a plan. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. I didn't want to just blow up everything without thinking it through. The next morning, I decided I'd wait until she got home from work. I wanted her to think I was still clueless, that I didn't have the evidence. I needed her to let her guard down. So I went to work as usual, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was boiling with anger and pain. I couldn't believe she'd done this to me. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. I thought about all the times she'd snapped at me, the little lies she told, and now I saw it all in a new light. When she finally came home that evening, she was in a rush. She looked tired, but her attitude was sharp. She greeted me with a fake smile, and I could see her eyes darting around, trying to gauge my mood. That's when I decided it was time. I pulled out the printed messages and photos I'd saved from her phone and bank statements, laying them out on the table. "Lisa," I started, my voice trembling a little. "We need to talk." She looked at the evidence I laid out, her face hardening. She tried to brush it off, a smirk playing on her lips. "What are you talking about? You're overreacting. You're crazy." I shook my head. "No, Lisa, I saw everything. The texts, the pictures, the money you've been taking out. I know you've been cheating on me with Mark. How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, but then she quickly masked it with her usual bitchy attitude. "Look, I don't know what you think you found, but you're making a big deal out of nothing. Mark's just a friend. We're not doing anything. You're overreacting because you're insecure." I felt my blood boil. "Insecure? You're lying. I saw the messages. I saw the hotel pictures. The money you took out. How could you lie to my face?" She crossed her arms, scoffing. "Oh, please. You're just jealous because I'm better than you. Mark's a successful guy, and I deserve better than some guy who's been working the same dead-end job for years. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd see that I'm only doing what makes me happy." That was the moment I realized her whole attitude was a shield, a way to deflect responsibility, to pretend she was the victim. But I also saw something else. Her eyes flickered with panic when I mentioned the money. She knew she'd been caught, and she was trying to spin her way out of it. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I wanted her to leave, that I needed some space to think. She threw a fit, yelling that I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid, and that I was crazy for accusing her. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, and even tried to turn it around on me, saying I was the one cheating or hiding something. But I knew the truth, and I refused to back down. I told her I'd call a lawyer, that I wanted to separate, and that I wanted her out of the house. Her face turned red with rage, and she stormed off, screaming that I'd regret this, that she'd take everything from me if I pushed her too far. That night, I sat alone in the dark, feeling numb. All those years I'd spent building a life with her, trusting her, loving her, gone in an instant. What hurt the most was knowing that she'd lied to my face for months, maybe longer. Every moment I thought I knew her, I was wrong. I'd never been so betrayed in my life, and I didn't even know if I'd ever recover from it. But even in the midst of all that pain, I knew I had to keep going. I had to prepare myself for what was coming next. I couldn't let her manipulate me or gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I had the proof, and I was going to use it. I started researching how to handle divorce, property disputes, and the legal fees I was going to face. I also knew I had to be careful. Lisa was a manipulative bitch who'd do anything to keep her secrets hidden. I couldn't just blow everything up without a plan. I was hurt, angry, and betrayed, but I also knew I had to be smart if I was going to come out of this with some sense of justice. I kept thinking about the money she'd stolen, the lies she told, the life we built that was now crumbling. It felt like everything I'd worked for was slipping through my fingers, and I was left standing there, broken and furious. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her ruin me without a fight. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, financial chaos, and emotional exhaustion. I spent hours on the phone with lawyers, trying to understand what I was up against. Lisa, of course, everything, acting innocent whenever I confronted her directly. She'd cry, scream, and throw tantrums, claiming I was the one cheating, that I was paranoid and controlling. Her tears seemed so fake, so rehearsed. I could see right through her act now. She was good at pretending to be the victim, but I knew better. She was the one who lied, who betrayed, who stole from me. The worst part was dealing with the legal mess. She had drained our joint account, over $250, $0 gone, money I'd worked years to save. She spent it on her secret meetings, fancy dinners, and who knows what else. I found out she'd also secretly transferred some of our property into her name, trying to hide assets. Her plan was clear. She wanted to cut me out completely, to leave me with nothing. I was furious. How could she do this? How could someone I loved turn into such a manipulative, selfish bitch? The legal fees started piling up fast. Every phone call with my lawyer, every document I had to prepare, each new discovery about her financial schemes cost me thousands. I was basically fighting to keep what was mine, fighting not just for money but for my dignity. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, pretending to be the victim, crying about how unfair everything was. She'd call me names, accuse me of being abusive or controlling just to turn the tables. Honestly, it was exhausting. I felt like I was fighting a ghost, a master manipulator who knew all the tricks to twist everything around. One day I found out she'd been secretly seeing Mark again. I caught her in the act. She was at his place, a hotel room near the city. I had driven by, saw her car parked there, and I could feel my blood boiling again. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't keep playing this game of hide and seek. I needed her out of my life permanently. I called her and told her to meet me at a neutral place. When she arrived, she had that same smug look, like she thought she was untouchable. I laid everything out, the messages, the bank transfers, the hotel receipts. Her face drained of color, but she still tried to deny everything. "You're crazy," she spat. "This is all just a misunderstanding. You're overreacting because you're insecure." I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I was done. I said I was filing for divorce, that I wanted her gone. I told her I'd fight her for every penny, for every asset she tried to hide, and that I'd take her to court if I had to. She yelled, screamed, threw her purse at me, but I didn't flinch. I knew I had the proof now, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. That night I sat alone in my house, feeling a strange mixture of relief and despair. Relief because I finally had a plan, a way out of this nightmare. Despair because I'd lost the woman I once loved, someone I thought was my partner for life. I kept asking myself how she could do this to me, to us. How could she lie, cheat, steal from the very life we built? The betrayal cut so deep I didn't know if I'd ever fully trust again, but I also knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I had to keep my head clear and focus on rebuilding. I was angry, yes, but I also realized I needed to be smarter than her. If she thought she could lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. I'd gather all the evidence I had, push forward with the divorce, and make sure she paid for her deceit. I'd learned a lot in these past few days about trust, about the importance of being vigilant, and about how some people will do anything for money and control. Most importantly, I learned that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it destroys everything if you let it. But it also teaches you who really matters, who's worth fighting for. I'm not there yet, but I'm beginning to see a way out. One thing's certain, Lisa's lies have cost us everything, but I refuse to let her take my life along with it. I'll rebuild piece by piece, and I'll make sure she regrets every moment she thought she could get away with this. The legal process dragged on longer than I expected. Every day felt like a new battlefield. Lisa's lawyers were relentless, trying every trick in the book to delay, deny, or minimize her guilt. She continued to deny everything in court, spinning stories about how I was controlling and abusive, how she was just trying to find herself, how Mark was just a friend she was helping out. It was all bullshit, but I knew how. She operated, lying, twisting, manipulating. The more I realized how deep her lies went. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the fallout of her financial schemes. I hired forensic accountants who uncovered her secret transfers and hidden assets. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. She'd set up offshore accounts, moved property into her sister's name, and even tried to forge documents to make it look like she owned everything outright. But the evidence was piling up against her. It was clear she had no intention of going quietly, and I had to be prepared for a fight. One day, I got a call from my lawyer. The judge had scheduled a hearing for the divorce, and we needed to be ready. I remember sitting in my car outside the courthouse, feeling numb but determined. I'd lost a lot, money, trust, my sense of security, but I still had my dignity. I was going to fight to keep what was rightfully mine and to hold her accountable. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about justice. The day of the hearing was intense. Lisa showed up looking angry and desperate. She tried to play the victim again, crying about how I was ruining her life, how she was the real victim here. But I had all the evidence, texts, bank statements, hotel receipts, and I made sure the court saw everything. I explained how she'd been stealing money, cheating on me, and trying to hide her assets. My lawyer hammered home the point that her lies were not just betrayal, they were fraud. The judge listened patiently, then made some tough rulings. Lisa was ordered to pay back a significant portion of the stolen money, and the court froze her assets until a full forensic audit could be completed. I felt a small sense of relief. Justice, at least in some form, was starting to be served. But I also knew this was just the beginning. The legal battle was far from over, and I had to prepare for the worst. Throughout this process, I couldn't help but reflect on how much my life had changed. I'd gone from a guy happily married, building a future, to a man fighting to reclaim what was stolen from him. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, and mentally. It was a crushing blow to realize my wife had been lying to me, cheating on me, and secretly ruining us all along. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let her win. I had to stay strong, focus on the facts, and keep moving forward. I also started thinking about the bigger picture, about trust, about how people can hide their true selves behind masks. Lisa had been so good at pretending, at lying, that I almost believed her. But the truth always comes out. It's just a matter of patience and persistence. I learned that if you want justice, you have to fight for it, no matter how hard it gets. And I was ready for that fight. The worst part, knowing that she'd probably do it again if she got the chance. That realization scared me, but it also motivated me to be smarter, more cautious. I didn't want to end up in this nightmare again. I wanted to rebuild, to find some peace, and maybe someday trust again. But for now, I had to focus on finishing what I started, exposing her lies, protecting what's mine, and making sure she paid for the pain she caused. It was a long road ahead, but I was determined to see it through. The months that followed were every new court date, every new piece of evidence felt like a fresh wound. Lisa refused to admit any wrongdoing, insisting she was the victim of my paranoia and obsession. She played the victim card so well I almost believed her, but I knew better. I had the proof, every text, every bank transfer, every hotel receipt. Still, watching her spin her stories and manipulate the court system was infuriating. It was like fighting a ghost. During this time, I also had to deal with the emotional toll. I'd wake up some mornings feeling numb, like I'd lost part of myself. I'd look at the house we shared, now filled with memories of betrayal. I'd see her things, her clothes, her jewelry, and feel a surge of anger mixed with sadness. How could someone I loved so deeply turn into this lying, scheming person? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her true nature all along. The trust I once had felt shattered beyond repair. Financially, things were just as complicated. Lisa kept fighting to hide her assets, claiming she had a right to keep everything, even the money she'd stolen from us. She hired her own team of lawyers, and the legal fees skyrocketed. I was drained physically and mentally, trying to keep up with her manipulations. I hired forensic accountants who uncovered more hidden accounts, offshore investments, and even fake loans she'd taken out under her sister's name. It was like peeling back layers of a lie, each one more disturbing than the last. One night I found out from my lawyer that Lisa was planning to file for full custody of our daughter, claiming I was unfit because I was controlling and abusive. That was the last straw. I knew she'd do anything to turn the situation against me. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I gathered my own evidence, texts, emails, witnesses, and prepared to fight for custody. I wanted my daughter to see the truth, to know her mother was capable of such betrayal. It was heartbreaking, but I refused to let her manipulate my child into thinking I was the bad guy. The court hearings grew more intense. Lisa's lies were exposed again and again. We had a judge who was no fool. He saw right through her manipulations and ordered her to pay back a significant portion of the stolen money. He also limited her access to our daughter until she could prove she was stable and honest. It was a small victory, but it felt like justice. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Lisa was a master at twisting facts, and I had to stay vigilant. Through it all, I learned some harsh lessons. Trust is earned, not given. People can hide their true selves behind a mask, even those closest to you. I also learned that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about protecting yourself, your future, and your integrity. Lisa's betrayal cost us a fortune, nearly destroyed our lives, and left scars I didn't think I could heal. But I was still standing. I was still fighting. Most importantly, I realized I had to focus on my daughter's well-being. No matter how much I wanted revenge, I knew she needed stability, love, and honesty. I made it my mission to be a better father, to shield her from her mother's lies, and to rebuild my life from the ground up. My trust in people was shattered, yes, but I refused to let that destroy me. This experience had shown me that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those you love the most, but it also taught me resilience. I was battered, but I was not broken, and I was determined to come out of this stronger, wiser, and ready to start over, without her lies clouding my future anymore. By the time the dust finally settled, I looked around and realized I barely recognized my life anymore. The house was quieter, emptier. The woman I once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely knew, someone who had been betrayed, hurt, and forced to confront the harshest truths about trust and loyalty. It was a brutal lesson, but one I had to learn the hard way. I still had scars, emotional, financial, and mental, but I also had clarity. I knew now that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail just to keep what's yours. The legal battles drained my savings, my patience, and my faith in love. I spent countless nights questioning everything: what I did wrong, what I missed, how I could have been so blind. But deep down, I knew the problem wasn't me. It was her. Lisa's greed, her lies, her need for control had blinded her to everything real. She thought she could manipulate her way out of everything, but the truth always finds a way to come out. And when it does, it leaves destruction in its wake. I learned to be cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the small signs of deception. I also learned the importance of standing up for myself, no matter how intimidating the opposition. I fought for my dignity, for my daughter's future, and for the little piece of peace I could still find in this chaos. The court's decisions, the forensic reports, they all confirmed what I'd known from the start. Lisa was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. And I refused to let her define me. In the end, I moved out of the house, started fresh in a new city, and focused on healing. I found solace in small things: my daughter's smile, a good book, a quiet walk. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing her actions, but about freeing myself from the anger and bitterness that threatened to consume me. I don't think I'll ever fully forget what happened, but I've learned to live with it and to grow from it. Looking back, I wish I could tell every man out there that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you if you fight smart and stay true to yourself. Trust is fragile, and not everyone deserves it. But when it's broken, you pick up the pieces, learn, and move forward. I've come to accept that sometimes people are who they are, and it's better to see the truth early than to be by lies for years. So here's my final takeaway: never ignore the warning signs. Protect what's yours, and most importantly, never let anyone, no matter how much you love them, make you feel small or unworthy. Because at the end of the day, your life is your own. You owe it to yourself to fight for it, to demand honesty, and to walk away if you have to. I did, and I'm finally starting to rebuild what was almost lost. It's not perfect, and I'll carry the scars for a while, but I know I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. That's what betrayal teaches you: resilience and the courage to start anew.